one of the stories we didn't get to.
You wanted to talk about happiness.
That's right. We wanted to talk about happiness. And a new survey released by, it was the 2022 American Family Survey. You combine that with a new poll from YouGov and Deseret News that found liberals are about 15 percentage points less likely to be, quote, completely satisfied with their lives. Ryan is laughing. This is from Unheard. Brad Wilcox, the great Brad Wilcox, whose work you should follow. He says, quote, liberals, especially liberal women, are significantly less likely to be happy with their lives and satisfied with their mental health compared to their conservative peers aged 18 to 55. More from Brad, quote, the survey goes on to find that liberals are about 18 percentage points less likely to be completely satisfied with their mental health than conservatives, but the problem appears to be especially acute for liberal women who register the lowest level of satisfaction with their lives and mental health. Indeed, only 15% of liberal women in the age group surveyed are completely satisfied with their lives, compared to 31% of conservative women. Likewise, only 15% of liberal women are completely satisfied with their mental health, compared to 36% of conservative women. This is incredibly loaded data because it depends on how you define terms like complete and satisfied, and then the combination of them being completely satisfied. It depends on how you define mental health and your own satisfaction with mental health. What does that look like? So if you believe mental health is sort of a more pressing daily problem that needs to be addressed, as many people on the left probably do, then you may be less likely just to be completely satisfied with your mental health, even if you're mentally healthy. So this is like a very, very loaded sort of series of questions, and there are a lot of variables to parse here. That said, when you are able to see gaps, there's something there. What do you make of it, Ryan?
I mean, one thing off the top I would say is that liberals are more likely to have college degrees, more likely to have graduate degrees. Mm-hmm. People with college degrees and graduate degrees are more likely to be the types of people who are going to actually something to death or nitpick the kind of definition of it. And so if you say to somebody like that, are you completely satisfied? They're going to overthink it in a way. Well, completely satisfied, and they'll have some philosophical rationale.
Is anyone ever completely
satisfied?
Right.
If I say that I'm completely satisfied, does that mean that I have no aspirational satisfaction in the future? Like, so I could see like a non-trivial number of liberals just obnoxiously quibbling with and overthinking the question, and then refusing to like take part. Some are going to do the not sure or they're just going to refuse to participate in something that takes something as nuanced as the meaning of life and tries to chunk it into a single polling question, and so they're going to be gone from that number. Where I think on the conservative side, you just get more people that are like, yeah, I'm completely satisfied. Sure, well, things are good. Yeah.
So Brad
Eagles won last night.
Brad does a lot of really interesting work, and he's the author of the Unheard article on marriage and children and the way that they do create some measure of what you could call satisfaction in people's lives. And his theory in the Unheard article is that liberals are clearly less likely to be married and less likely to have children, and that is eating away at their ability to come to that answer that, yes, I'm completely satisfied with my life. Women, the Institute for Family Studies, Lyman Stone over there, has done some really interesting research on how American women are actually having fewer children than they say they want to, which is an interesting point. And we know that as the marriage rate has gone up, that's also becoming an issue for women in terms of whether they're able to enter into that institution. And there's a lot of actually research that shows a correlation between marriage and happiness. Now, children is another question. There's some research that shows in certain periods of parenthood, happiness is not at its peak. So there's sort of a different question there. But Ryan, I wanted to ask you, one thing we see, especially in sort of urban areas, you actually have a long marriage and a lot of kids.
I do.
That's not super common on the left. Do people look at you like you're a freak?
I mean, sometimes.
Yeah.
But,
what are you doing, man?
Yeah, a little bit.
Especially among millennials. I mean, especially in the younger left.
Sure. Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. You have to have explanations.
Like what is your explanation?
I don't really want to get into all the explanations. But you kind of need them. Then it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah. But I think another potential piece of this, because I was trying to think how I would answer this.
Yeah.
I think another potential piece of it could be liberal guilt about the state of the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you ask me in my personal life how I would answer this, I would say completely satisfied. But then I would immediately feel guilty for saying that, because
I can't be happy.
the world is such a miserable place right now. So how dare I? Because my satisfaction, has to also be connected to the other people in the world. We're social beings. If one person isn't free, then nobody's free. That kind of approach. So if one person isn't satisfied, nobody's satisfied. And so for a lot of liberals, they really aren't satisfied unless they feel like the world is moving in a positive direction, because they feel a responsibility for the rest of the world. Where I think conservatives probably have what is a mentally healthier way of approaching it, which is to say, I'm looking out for me and my family, and the rest of you are kind of on your own, and it's not my responsibility and it's not my burden to worry about that.
I don't think they would say it's not their responsibility or their burden so much as they would say that it's the sort of immediate question of satisfaction and happiness is one that they have to, and not that like they don't continue to do charity. There's research that shows conservatives tend to be more philanthropic, more charitable, but that it's the question of happiness is not one that they can control for other people. You can sort of do different things, but not necessarily be able to control other people. That said. There's the mental health question is a really interesting one. I think there's some pretty convincing and persuasive research that social media use, which is increasing for a lot of different reasons, one of which it depends on how you kind of define social media, but even things like Gmail. We are all using these apps on our smartphones and on laptops more and more and more. And if those are demonstrated to show a decline in mental health, if you are more likely to be educated, you're more likely to be, the more educated you are, the more likely you are to be liberal. And that means you're probably more likely to have a laptop job and or a Zoom, so being what we now post-COVID call the Zoom class, which means you may be more likely to spend time on social media, on your smartphone, and working. And that I can see very much being correlated with dips in mental health, especially compared with people who are more likely to be doing manual labor, people who are have kids to worry about and can't necessarily can actually have a good excuse to put the phone down going forward. So yeah, I mean it's a difficult thing to sort of parse out. I do think there's really something to this question of mental health and lifestyle that is hitting the left harder than it's hitting the right at the moment, given the way the sort of working world is organized.
This is a deeply disturbing number of 15% of liberal women saying they're completely satisfied with their mental health. It's a really small number.
It's a really small number.
The 21% for liberal men is not a whole lot better.
And it's interesting.
15 is just brutal.
It was interesting that you're more than doubling it when you get to the question of conservatives as well. And so, yes.
It's still only a third of people.
Only a third, right. Yeah. But the fact that it's more than double
people are miserable
based on ideology is striking. And again, it's something that I don't think trickles into the political discourse at all. You hear a little bit of it from actually AOC, who talks about, this sort of, I think she channels this sense of like millennial misery in ways that you don't have a lot of figures on the right, other than maybe Trump, who talks about American carnage and that sort of language, or speaks in that sort of language, is tapping into. I think it's Marianne Williamson who talks about, this idea that if you look at birth rates or people not wanting to have children, what does that say about the mindset and the mental health, frankly, of people going forward as well? And so, yeah, these are really big questions. I don't think they're questions that our politics is super focused on addressing. I know you would agree with me on that. We would have different ways of addressing it. But yes, it's, we'll see what happens in the future. But interesting numbers. And I would encourage certainly any politicians who might be watching this to pay attention to that, because the country can be going into some really dark places when you have people in abject misery, basically.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.